The launch of the Long Road Australia's Train, Advise and Assist missions was hosted by the Australian Centre for the Study of Armed Conflict and Society, University of New South Wales, Canberra. The book was launched by the Deputy Chief of the Australian Army, Major General Rick Burr, DSc, AM, MVO. Among the speakers at the launch were Dr. Alex Zielinski, Chief Defence Scientist from the Defence Science and Technology Group, and the audience included current and retired service officers, past and present politicians, as well as 16 of the 23 contributing authors to the book, and was followed by a panel discussion. The panel comprised authors Colonel Brett Challoner, Lieutenant Colonel Mark O'Neill, and Ms. Wendy Hu, and it was facilitated by Professor Tom Frame.
Good afternoon and welcome to the launch of The Long Road, Australia's Train, Advise and Assist missions, published by UNSW Press. I'm Professor Tom Frame, the Director of the Australian Centre for the Study of Armed Conflict and Society at UNSW Canberra, and the University acknowledges the Ngunnawal people who are the traditional custodians of the land upon which we meet this afternoon. The University pays its respect to elders both past and present and extends that respect to other Aboriginal people who are present. Can I extend this afternoon a personal welcome to Major General Rick Burr, the Deputy Chief of Army, Dr. Alex Zielinski, the Chief Defence Scientist, Major General Matthew Hall of the Defence Intelligence Organisation, the Honourable David Feeney, MP, the Federal Member for Batman, Mr. Jeremy Hansen, the Honourable Margaret Reid, former President of the Senate, the Honourable Justice Shane Gill, and Sergeant Cameron Butler, who I suspect has never heard himself acknowledged in that company before, but he's our cover boy. He's on the front cover and he's here and he's about to wave his arms in the air. Now, can I also convey an apology from the Minister of Defence, the Honourable Maurice Payne, who was to launch the book this afternoon, but has been prevented from doing so by the visit of His Excellency Mohammed Ashraf Ghani, President of the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. We will be making a copy of the book available to His Excellency. After all, it's his country that is pictured on the cover as well. And also I bring an apology from the Rector of UNSW Canberra, Professor Michael Frater, who is overseas. To get us in the mood for the launch of this book this afternoon, I'm delighted that DSTG, the Defence Science and Technology Group, have produced a video giving us a sense of train advised assist missions, both in still pictures and in video. So just for a few moments, please enjoy the movie. The book that we launched this afternoon is about contemporary issues, but it's also taking a historical perspective. And so it comes as a surprise to many to learn that our first assistance mission was in fact a century ago, at the end of the Great War. There was of course a 10-year assistance mission in South Vietnam, and there was of course a little known but highly influential mission to Uganda. And Lieutenant Colonel Patrick Cullinan, who's here, represents those who served in Uganda. And if you have no idea what Australians did in Uganda, well, you can buy a book, and this is your great opportunity to find out. This book is also the fourth in a series of volumes produced by the Australian Centre for the Study of Armed Conflict and Society at UNSW Canberra since 2015. The first of our series was a book on moral injury and unseen wounds sustained in recent conflicts. Because the centenary of Anzac Day was coming up, we did a book looking at the changing face of Anzac Day, from when it went from being, if you like, a collective national funeral to the commemorations that many of us have experienced, and most recently, lessons and challenges for the Australian Army since East Timor. It's a delight to us to be working with both uniformed personnel and civilians reflecting upon their service, and I have to say that they've taken up our invitation to speak freely and frankly as people who are thinking, and to help us produce books that are meeting a very lively readership. Our centre hosts multidisciplinary inquiry into the causes but also the consequences of armed conflict. We're interested in the place of ethics in deployed service. Military history, of course, is one of our strengths. We're also wanting to focus on transnational security and a subject that is not often touched on, civilian leadership in defence. It greets some people as a surprise to know that it isn't generals that commit the nation to war, it's actually civilians. And that is a high calling in and of itself. We also host two databases. The First World War database, of which you may not be aware, is based on the embarkation roll. There are 331,000 entries of all those who deployed in the First World War. So if you have a relative who you think might have served, this is your chance to find out what they really did do, as apart from what the family legend holds that they did. We also have the Vietnam War database, which is a database of 4,665 contacts between Australian forces and Vietnamese forces between 1967 and 1971. It is a wonderfully interactive tool, particularly for young people who think, oh, military history, I can't be bothered. But when they can actually track through all sorts of media the conduct of the war, it will engage them in a way, I think, that's not been done before. My apologies. And so the fourth volume, the volume that we're launching today, is a collaboration between the university, the Defence Science and Technology Group, and Headquarters Joint Operations Command. And I'm pleased to introduce the Chief Defence Scientist, Dr. Alex Zielinski, to explain DSTG's commitment to security force assistance and this project. Now, for those who don't know him, Dr. Zielinski has been the Chief Defence Scientist and Head of DST Group since 2012. His scientific career includes work as a computer scientist, a systems engineer, and a roboticist. His career spans innovation, science, technology, research and development, commercial startups and education. Dr. Zielinski has received numerous awards and recognition for his work and has been included in Engineers Australia's list of the 100 most influential engineers since 2009. And I can't let this moment pass without noting that he was born and educated in Wollongong and happened to grow up 2 streets away from me. Please welcome Dr. Alex Zielinski.
It's great to be with a fellow guy from the Gong, and way too much information there, Tom, but let me begin by acknowledging the Honourable Justice Shane Gill, the Honourable David Feeney, MP, Major General Rick Burr, Deputy Chief of Army Dr. Albert Palazzo, Senior Research Fellow, Land Warfare Systems Centre, Brigadier Richard Iron, and of course Tom Frame, and distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and good afternoon. I also acknowledge the Ngunnawal people, the traditional custodians of land which we meet, and pay my respect to their elders past and present. In fact, we're in the Ngunnawal Theatre, which actually acknowledges our reconciliation with them. This book The Long Road is an important contribution to the history of defence operations. It's a culmination, a lot of hard work and collaboration between Defence Science and Technology and the University of New South Wales Australian Centre for the Study of Armed Conflict and Society. It brings together experts from the military, academic and civilian communities. The book analyses the successes and failures of our efforts to help our neighbours and partners rebuild their communities and political systems after conflicts over the last 50 years. It covers our security force assistance from the Middle East to Africa and closer to home in Southeast Asia and the Pacific. I think each chapter in the book raises important insights and issues relating to the planning and conduct of these operations. There are significant challenges that cannot easily be solved and need to be considered in a much broader context. I see science and technology can play a role in addressing these challenges, particularly learning from the outcomes. A lot of times our work actually goes back into post-mortems or understanding what actually happened. And I've got to say the Australian Defence Force has been great at actually looking back at what has worked and what hasn't and taking that forward. And that's been probably one of our previous big contributions and certainly a highlight of our where we can probably create the greatest value. And our scientists have a proud history of supporting defence operations, and it is our number one priority. And when I look back in the history of our organisation, I think the first scientist hired by Defence was back in 1908. And we've had over a century of support, and back in those days you were actually regarded to be, the organisation was to support operations and people were deployed. I've looked back in our archives and we've got history of reports going back certainly to the 1960s in Vietnam, and defence scientists and technologists were actually supporting our operations then. We have some interesting number of reports from that time, but from the 60s until the late 1990s we really didn't do much in that area. So really the 1990s was and particularly 1999 was a reconnection into supporting operations, and since 1999 we've really been focused on this support to operations. We've deployed a total of 241 scientists to ADF operations, including 140 flyaway teams. So this is a considerable contribution, and it's not been just interpreting and analysing operational data and missions, but it's also been around the human analysis of what actually has transpired in theatre. And we've also taken those lessons back in to provide pre-deployment training for the ADF, and also thought about how we can insert new technologies into the field. And being but technology, it needs to be highly adaptable. And I think one of the great examples for us in recent times has certainly been in Afghanistan and Iraq with the counter-IED products, which we've significantly reduced casualties for the ADF. In fact, we've now developed new products with the Red Wing program, which is now being used by our allies with the Afghani National Security Forces. So science and technology has improved the preparation of Australian coalition forces, and we remain committed to this task into the future. Even so, there is considerable potential for science and technology to enhance and extend ADF capabilities, improving regional security through capacity building missions among partner nations in our region. I should say our approaches should be tailored to the actual mission, particularly the cultural environment in which they are to be implemented, and our military personnel must be prepared for the unique challenges of operations during security force assistance. Now, one thing about this book, Tom, I'm very pleased to see that it actually addresses complex challenges, and rather than some of these books can be a look back on the history and lessons, but this is actually a sophisticated look at the challenges of deployment. And I really have to acknowledge two people, Kendi Hu and Colonel Brett Colliner. Kendi is one of our enterprising young staff inside DST, and we're very proud of Kendi's efforts. But it's also a credit to you, Tom, and who you've really engaged as a mentor to the project. And also I'd like to acknowledge our military experts, Lieutenant Colonel Mark O'Neill and Colonel Michael Bai. Kendi and Brett saw a need to bring together and highlight the scientific findings from previous operations. Now, bringing this sort of book together and getting it done, they had numerous setbacks, and I've got to say it's kind of the long road. It seems to be an appropriate title for the challenges they face. But look, I've got to give Kendi and Brett the credit. They never gave up. And the result is a very great, effective collaboration between defence science, technology, academia and the ADF. And I guess it was fostered by passion and persistence, and well done to them all. So I really do applaud their never say die spirit. So there's a lot of energy, enthusiasm, and I know without that we wouldn't have this book. So DST is very pleased to have sponsored the Long Road Conference, which some of the material that went into this book has been drawn upon. So I'd like to congratulate everyone in the room who's been associated with the production of this publication. Thank you very much for your support. We really do appreciate it. The Long Road will be a valuable resource for all of us in defence, particularly those who are going to be deployed into future deployments, particularly for my organisation. So I commend the book to you all, and thank you very much.
We are so pleased that the Long Road is to be formally launched by Major General Rick Byrd, DSC AM MVO. I suspect that if all of us were to go back to the beginning of our careers and imagine what our CV would be like, it would be like Rick Byrd's, except for the fact you wouldn't think one person could jam it all into one career. Well, that's how it seems to me in any event. But I was a naval officer, and what would I know? General Byrd has been the Deputy Chief of Army since January 2015. He graduated from the Royal Military College Duntroon in 1985. His very diverse career encompasses a unique range of command postings, including Deputy Commanding General, US Army Pacific, Command of the 1st Division and Deployable Joint Force Headquarters, and Command of the SAS Regiment. His operational commands have included the International Security Assistance Force, Special Operations Force in Afghanistan, and Australian Special Forces task groups in Afghanistan and in Iraq. He served as a senior advisor in the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. He's been Director General of Military Strategic Commitments, Director General of Preparedness and Plans Army, Chief Instructor of the Australian Defence Warfare Centre and Instructor at Duntroon, in addition to being Equerry to Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. So when I hear all of that taken together, I think if Rick Byrd thinks something, then I ought to listen because I'm going to learn something. Would you please join with me and welcome him to launch the book this afternoon?
Well, thanks, Tom. It has been a long road. Could I welcome the many distinguished guests here this afternoon. It is a great honour to be amongst you for this special occasion. Helping those less fortunate than ourselves to stabilise situations and work towards peace and security is a core activity for the Australian Defence Force. It is part of who we are as Australians, and it is a feature of our history. This new book from the UNSW Press, The Long Road, analyses the ADF's train, advise and assist missions and offers a comprehensive summary of and critically reflects upon those experiences. Usefully, it suggests ways to enhance or improve the conduct of those missions from the strategic level down to the tactical level. This is very welcome. As professionals, we seek continual improvement in our ability to prepare and conduct operations in the defence of Australia and its national interests. A particular strength of this work is the wide range of contributing authors, and I think there are 16 of them here today. They include media commentators, politicians, academics, business people, scientists, aid workers, diplomats, and military personnel. The spread of expertise reflects the diversity of issues and agendas which our people deal with daily on these types of operations. The book is structured across 10 themes. They range from the historical, political, and strategic through to the personal, from science and technology to lessons and legacies. The canvas is broad. Each chapter provides a rich and varied account of an aspect of Australia's experience of Indigenous security capacity building. The range of perspectives makes the book most relevant although I suspect it made the editorial task for Tom Frame very difficult. But to his credit, the narrative is certainly coherent and consistent, so well done. It has a great cover. I think that immediately catches everyone's eye, so well done on that. Most photographic there, but it really does tell a powerful story. But it's what's behind that story, between those covers, where the real story is told. And for me, several things emerge from reading this book. Foremost, how well our people adapt to these tasks and the unique environment in which they find themselves in. Perhaps it's an extension of our Australian character. They seem to have an affinity for it. They relate well to people at all levels. They have empathy, they share the risks, and they build trust. And as a result, they build deeply personal and very strong bonds. And whilst not usually a combat task, these missions are not without danger. The book reinforces that our training focus on combat prepares us for success in these types of missions. Indeed, I'd say our Australian Army values of courage, initiative, respect and teamwork are also well aligned for success on these missions. From a doctrinal viewpoint, and certainly prior to Iraq and Afghanistan, we perhaps viewed security force assistance too narrowly as a discrete role for a specific part of the force. I think the case has been made that it is actually a mission for the wider force, indeed across government. We need to think about how we develop and sustain the requisite knowledge, skills and attitude across that entire force and across government for these mission types. The book is a highly relevant and very readable distillation of experiences, lessons and pointers to future success in this area of recurring importance. Reading it makes me proud of our people and the efforts they make to help others, often without reward, but usually with deep personal satisfaction that comes from making a difference. The way Team Australia comes together should make us all proud. Our collective responsibility is to learn from these hard-won experiences and apply them skillfully to the next challenge, and there will be more to come. So well done. I would like to acknowledge the shared vision of Headquarters JOC, DSTG and the Australian Centre for the Study of Armed Conflict and Society in bringing this project together. To the many contributing authors and those who presented papers at the seminar, thank you for sharing your stories and your commitment to improving our conduct of these missions. And finally, to Tom Frame and the publishing team at UNSW Press, thank you for producing this fine and very readable work. It will have utility for many years to come for policy practitioners, operational planners, military operators and historians alike. It now gives me great pleasure to formally launch The Long Road. I commend the book to you. Thank you.
Good evening, my name is Rita Parker and I work with Professor Tom Frame at the Australian Centre for the Study of Armed Conflict and Society. And it is with a great pleasure and sincerity that we thank General Burr for making time in his very busy and demanding schedule to be here today to launch this, what we also consider at the Centre to be a very important and significant book. We greatly appreciate your comments, your insights, and your, I suspect, some personal connection with some of those operational and procedural accounts that are in the book. We also appreciate you recognising the role of the Centre and of DSTG as well, so thank you for that. The quality of any publication is reflected completely by the calibre and experience of the authors. And I think The Long Road certainly does reflect the valuable experience and the insights and the personal contribution of all the authors in terms of Australia's train, advise and assist missions. And we are delighted, as General Burr said, that we do have 16 of our authors here today, although I see a couple of empty spaces, so maybe my sums aren't quite right. But I'm delighted too that General Burr is going to make time to individually present a copy of the book to each of the authors today. So I'd like to begin by calling upon our very own Dr. Bob Hall to come forward to receive his copy of the book. He's author of the chapter entitled Vietnam, Insights Gained, Lessons Lost. Thank you. And I think there might be a photo opportunity for each of the authors here. Thank you. Lieutenant Colonel Patrick Cullinan is author of the chapter The Commonwealth Military Training Team, Uganda. The Honourable David Feeney, author of New Demands in the South Pacific. Major General Paul Simon, retired. Is he not here? Oh, my apologies, we'll move on. Brigadier Richard Iron is here, I do know, and he's author of Train, Advise, Assist, A British Perspective. Colonel Brett Challonan is here, yes. He's author of Advisors for a Generation. And next is a former colleague of mine, Lieutenant Colonel Mark O'Neill, PhD, author Advise Harder, Reflecting Critically on Capacity Building. Commodore Jack McCaffrey, PhD, from the RAN, is author of Train, Advise and Assist in the South Pacific. Dr. Matthew Richmond is here, yes, and author of Defence Science and Technology. That's chapter 17, if you're particularly interested. And Ms. Deborah Jepson is here, and she is author of Emotional Intelligence and Military Advisors. And Ms. Kendi Hu has already been mentioned, and she's author of The Big Investment, chapter 19. Dr. John Blaxland is author of the chapter on Army Reform and Assistance Mission. And Major Andrew Marr, author of the chapter on Strategic Planners. Coming from the back there, thank you. And I can say now one of my own current colleagues from the centre is Mr. Andrew Bly, author of Entrepreneurship for Post-Conflict Reconstruction. I can recommend chapter 22. I'd now like to invite Mr. Glenn Keyes, author of Assistance Missions and Contractor Support, chapter 23. And I can hardly say lastly, but on this occasion it is, Professor Tom Frame, editor of The Long Road and author of 2 chapters entitled The Long Road to Peace and Prosperity, chapter 1, and having the last word in chapter 24, The Soldier State, Compact Beyond National Defence. Please join me now in thanking General Burr and all the authors who are here today. So thank you. Now, unfortunately, the several authors were not able to be present this evening, and apologies have been received from the Honourable Kevin Andrews, the Air Commodore Matt Hegarty, Mr. Ian McPhedran, Lieutenant Colonel Richard Taylor, Mr. Chris Masters, Warrant Officer Andrew Roberts, and AFP Superintendent Jason Byrne. Now, as part of the programme, we are going to have a panel discussion with some of the authors. The discussion will be hosted by my colleague, Professor Tom Frame, who is, as you know, a distinguished academic at UNSW Canberra and currently director of the Centre. Professor Frame was rather modest about his own notable career, first in the Royal Australian Navy, beginning as a 16-year-old junior entry cadet midshipman, and then having a change of career to become none other than Bishop of the Australian Defence Force. Professor Frame is author of almost 40 books, either as author or editor, and as I said, a distinguished academic with a wealth of experience. Professor Frame will be joined and I believe you're going to introduce or am I introducing? I'm introducing the three panellists. So we're going to have contributions by Ms. Kendi Ho. Kendi joined DST Group in 2009 and led 3 field studies in Afghanistan in 2012, associated with the cultural capability study, looking at friction points that might jeopardise the mentoring mission and increase insider risk threats. She's currently completing her PhD at UNSW Canberra. Colonel Brett Challoner graduated from Duntroon in 1994 and subsequently served in the Special Air Services Regiment in East Timor. He was also deployed to the Middle East, the Iraq invasion, and later in Afghanistan, and he's currently director of the Joint Combined Training at HQ JOC, responsible for all major ADF exercises in Australia. And the final panellist will be Lieutenant Colonel Mark O'Neill, who also graduated from RMC Duntroon, but in 1988. And his career has included operational experience in Somalia, Mozambique, Iraq, and Afghanistan. He's currently SO1 Strategic Analysis in Headquarters Army in the Office of the Chief of Army. And he completed his doctorate at UNSW Canberra. There's a theme we're getting here, isn't there? So I think you're going to now take over from this for the panel, I believe.
I will, please.
Thank you.
course, it's not possible to have books without someone to publish them. And Cathy Bale is the Chief Executive Officer of UNSW Press. She has vast experience in publishing and media management. She's a former editor of the Australian Financial Review magazine, The Bulletin, and two very important academic journals, HQ, for those who are lovers of old Holdens. Pause while my attempt at humour kind of takes its effect. And Rolling Stone, the latter being a well-known academic journal for geologists. Slightly more successful with that one. From 2003 to 2006, Cathy was a director of Melbourne University Publishing. We are delighted that she leads the UNSW Press team. I've been working with them for 14 years on different books over the years, and perhaps I'll give Cathy the final word before we finish. Cathy, thank you.
Thanks, Tom, for that generous introduction. Good afternoon or evening, distinguished guests. On behalf of my colleagues at UNSW Press, it's great to be here with you all for this launch of The Long Road. And as a publisher, I have enjoyed hearing the endorsements of that wonderful cover and all of the contributions. I'd like to thank the Deputy Chief of Army, Major General Rick Burr, for launching the book and for your appreciation of this distinctive collection of essays. For those of you who may not know, UNSW Press is a company owned by UNSW. It's been in business since 1962, publishing books in two imprints, UNSW Press and New South. With prize winners, political sagas, narrative histories and scholarly collections, our university press is now regarded as one of the leading non-fiction publishers in Australia. Our books tell uniquely Australian stories, and I'm proud to say they resonate with booksellers, prize committees, media producers, reviewers, and most of all, with readers. We've developed a reputation for innovative publishing. Our group is agile, creative, and responsive to any opportunity that comes our way. We publish books that create debate and spark conversation. You can see where this book fits in. We publish books that find new audiences and simultaneously increase our market share. And we commission and publish different kinds of authors, from academics to journalists to professional authors. And we work collaboratively with leading cultural, philanthropic and academic organisations. And one of the most notable of these is, of course, UNSW Canberra, which has a continuing relationship with Defence that began in 1967, 5 years after UNSW Press started publishing its academic books. Indeed, we're delighted to be publishing the official history of the UNSW Defence Force Partnership on its 50th anniversary. So you can see that we all go back a long way. Many of our authors are based at UNSW Canberra, and you won't be surprised to hear that one of the most productive and energetic authors in this group is Professor Tom Frame. And a few years ago, he came to us with a proposal for a new series with the Centre for the Study of Armed Conflict and Society. The Long Road, as you've heard, is the fourth book we've published in this distinctive series. We expect there will be many more, given the excellent response that we've had to the original and challenging scholarship in these books. This partnership is largely managed by my colleagues Elspeth Menzies and Paul O'Byrne, who try to keep up with Tom and a diverse and growing group of contributors. We'll be selling and promoting The Long Road globally. This is of interest in Australia, of course, but we have global distribution networks. And along with those of you gathered here, this book will be contributing to an important public discussion about what we've learned from Australia's often complex missions over the past 50 years or so. Thank you for joining with us today.
Thank you, Cathy. Before I invite my colleague, Andrew Blythe, to close the proceedings, can I say that I live on a cattle farm 76 kilometres from here. I love my cows, I love my farm. There are very few things which make me want to leave my farm, but one of them is the possibility of working with some people who I find quite extraordinary. And in writing and working with this particular book, there was a person who seemed to me personified the kind of things that we can do. And General Burr said that we have established a tradition, we Australians around the world, of people that get alongside others. And so, Cameron, if you would please come out, let me present you your copy of the book. After all, I've stolen your face for the cover. And I want to say it's people like Cameron that make me proud to do the things that I do. Would you please join with me in congratulating him too? Andrew.
Thank you, Tom, and ladies and gentlemen, if I may just be allowed a couple of things. I'd like to dedicate my chapter to my brother, Group Captain Grant Pinder, and thank him for his service and for his deployment to Iraq and Afghanistan. So thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is my last duty as Centre Manager for the Australian Centre for the Study of Armed Conflict and Society before moving to a new leadership research group role at the university. I certainly wasn't expecting so many people to attend my farewell, so thank you. Drinks are on me. But look, there is no I in team, but there is 4 in initiative. And on behalf of Tom and Rita, a big thank you to our 4 colleagues for showing their initiative in the lead up to this event. And that is Holly Steer, UNSW Canberra Event Manager, Rachel Hunter, our Development Officer, John Carroll, UNSW Canberra Creative Media Unit, and to Mr Wayne Shipp, Army Research Centre. Thank you all for your help in making this event possible. So, oh, and Nick. Well, it depends on his photos on social media. Waiting. No, you're right. And of course, to Nick, our social media genius, who's doing everything he can, and we're very proud of the fact that we've grown our social media presence at the centre from 0 to 406 followers in the year that it's taken. Condoleezza Rice has 200,000. But we're doing okay. So look, with that, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Professor Tom Frame, thank you all for attending, and please join us for refreshments. Thank you.
For the first time, the Long Road analyses the successes and failures of Australia's train, advise and assist missions over the past 50 years in Iraq, Afghanistan, Papua New Guinea, Bougainville, Solomon Islands, South Vietnam and Uganda. The authors explore the complex challenges Australia faces in its protracted journey towards being better prepared to build security capacity and effective partnerships within conflict-ravaged nation-states it hopes to assist.